Emergency Broadcast, Crimson Alert, Chapter 8. Rosie sobbed uncontrollably in the corner as the doctor frowned at me. "Sir," he said gravely, "it appears you are suffering from a case of severe amnesia." "No, I'm not," I said firmly. "My name's not Stuart." "Then what is it?" the doctor said, raising an eyebrow. I opened my mouth, and my mind went blank. I glared down at the straps on my legs and wrists, struggling against them briefly, before glaring back at the doctor. "Why the hell am I restrained? Let me go!" "I've already explained this. We keep all coma patients restrained to prevent them from injuring themselves," the doctor said, tired. "Bullshit," I cried. "Utter bullshit. How can a coma patient hurt themselves?" The doctor's eyes brightened when he glanced to the door. At that moment, a nurse came in, holding a blank VHS tape, while another wheeled in an old television. The doctor turned back to me, smiling. "This will explain it," he said. He walked over to Rosie, put a hand on her shoulder, and led her out of the room as the TV was plugged in and the VHS tape inserted. The nurses turned it on and then moved to the side as the doctor came back in. The screen hummed as a picture formed, revealing a smiling man in a blue coat. His eyes were green, and his smile didn't reach them. "Hello," he said, his voice scratching in my ears through the static, like a razor blade. "I see you've woken up from your coma. You are probably wondering what happened. Well, I can assure you, coma patients are in far more danger than you can imagine. Did you know 9 out of every 10 coma patients kill themselves while sleepwalking?" "The fuck?" I said. Then the doctor shushed me. "It's true. And did you know 3 out of 5 coma patients never wake up, instead becoming sleepwalkers?" "Oh, it is true. I can assure you of that. See, you may be asleep, but your brain is still working like normal, and it's doing all those normal things, like making your arms and legs move. During this time, you may be imagining that you're living your everyday normal life, like making coffee or drinking tea. In truth, you could be strangling someone you love or walking into a busy highway. 2 cartoon figures, both paper cutouts, appeared on screen, one showing a sleeping man strangling his smiling, cheerful wife, while the other was sleepwalking right into the road, then getting smashed into poorly rendered pieces by an oncoming truck. That's not all. Your brain can even lie to you. Isn't that crazy? Imagine your brain making you think that you're in your living room watching TV, when you're spending years of your life walking around the same empty room, completely asleep, with no hope of waking up. It's crazy. "Got that right," I muttered sarcastically. The man on the screen seemed to cringe slightly. "That's why your local hospital staff is taking every precaution to see to it you are okay. They can do things like restrain you, inject you with sedatives, and, in extreme cases, amputate your limbs. I know that sounds a bit harsh, but it has to be done. Not just for your safety, but for others." Static briefly flashed across the screen before the image began to shake, replaced with a different one. My eyes widened at what I saw. "Jenny?" Then the screen returned to normal. The world won't be all that different from when you fell into the coma, but a few things might still shock you. Don't worry though, everything will be okay. Your doctor and nurses will take good care of you. Then the screen turned off. What the fuck was that horseshit? "Mr. Perkins, please, don't use that language." The doctor sighed. "No," I said firmly. "My name isn't Stuart Perkins. It's... Fuck, I don't know." "But we do," the doctor said softly. "We know who you are. We're trying to help you." "Help me? Help me? You just showed me a pack of bullshit." "How do you know it's bullshit?" The doctor made air quotes with his fingers. I opened my mouth, then began stammering. "A person in a coma is... They can't just wake up." "And why is that?" Because the brain has endured horrendous trauma and thus has to shut down for a while until it recovers. Though it still functions as normal, like on autopilot. I assure you, this is standard procedure to restrain a coma patient. You're lucky, as we might have had to amputate your limbs if you weren't. What the fuck is this about? I shrieked at the doctor. Explain to me how you can even remotely have a legal... It's perfectly legal, the doctor snapped at me. I can even show you the law in question. The Coma Act of 1927. It's been in effect for years. It's taught in the first semester of medical school. Then the doctor sighed, turning to the nurses. Then he turned back to me. Mr. Stewart, I'm afraid we might have to perform a lobotomy. I blinked at him, speechless. No, I said. No, you can't. Yes, the doctor said, tired. We can. The Lobotomy Act of 1987 was finalized last year. It's not 1987, I sputtered. It can't be. I was in the year 2019. A delusion of your damaged brain, the doctor said sadly, shaking his head. But I assure you, we can fix it. As if on cue, a nurse came in, carrying a syringe. He handed it into the doctor's bare hand, who then turned to me. Please, hold still, he said. No! I cried, shaking and struggling as the nurses grabbed my limbs, holding me in place. The doctor loomed over me, grabbing my arm and pressing the tip of the syringe against it. This will only sting for a moment, he said, then pressed it underneath my flesh and into my blood vessel. I screamed, then blacked out. Then I was on a hill, sitting on a blanket. There's a girl next to me, with tan skin and blue eyes like the sky. She turns to me, flashing a flawless smile as her hands run through her untamed hair. What did I do to deserve you? I asked her, and she laughed, before leaning in close. Her lips pressed against mine, and I sighed, gently holding onto her arm. When she drew back, she stroked my cheek with her fingers, softly smiling.
Wake up,
she whispered.
You have to wake up, baby. You have to wake up.
My eyes snapped open to find myself in the hospital room. But it was not the clean, sparkling room from before. It was covered in what looked like spider webs, each one collecting into cocoons in each corner. I began gasping and looked around, raising my head. Then it was forced back down onto the pillow. There was something wet in my hair, and screaming. The screaming was in my hair, then going into my skull. Like when you speak, you hear your voice through your own skull. I began to glance upward, catching a glimpse of a large caterpillar, then woke up again to see a large light above my head, shining into my eyes. I blinked and tried to raise my hands. Then leather bit into my wrists. I glanced down and found leather straps around my wrists, ankles, and chest. That was when the doctor loomed over me. He was still wearing his clothes and no face mask. I recoiled from him when he began speaking. Mr. Perkins, he said, good to see you. Now we can begin. He held out a hand. A nurse put an oversized corkscrew into it. The doctor came forward, using both hands to hold it over my forehead. Please, no, I stammered. Don't do this. We have to, Mr. Perkins, he said. Then his eyes flashed green, like the man from the VHS tape. When he spoke again, his voice was like a razor blade on my eyeball. We have to. The end of the corkscrew pressed against my skin, began to twist, then stopped when somebody spoke. The doctor glanced around, confused. What was that? He hissed. Then the voice spoke up again, much clearer, in that infantile tone.
Seen my shoe?
I know them. I know who that is. While the doctor was looking away from me, I began straining against the straps on my wrists. I grunted, pulling harder. Then one snapped off. The doctor spun around, eyes wide as my free hand shot out and grabbed a massive corkscrew, pushing it away from my forehead and leaving a jagged cut against my skin. The doctor took a few steps back, mouth open in shock, to reveal a dark, gaping hole. No tongue, no teeth, no gums, nothing. Impossible, he hissed. Impossible! I won't let Hell have his fun. Not with you. The doctor roared in 1,000 voices and charged at me, but I had already broken my hand out of the other strap. Without thinking, I swung my fist at his head, punched him, and everything exploded again. When I woke up, Mickey Mouse was standing over me, axe by his side. But he wasn't looking at me. I could feel something on my head, and as I raised my hands to find a thick, massive, girthy thing, divided into segments, and covered in what felt like eyes, noses, and mouths. "Awake, are we?" said the unmistakable voice of Moloch. "You're stronger than I thought, but it won't save you. You're mine, mine, mine." My fingers dug into the thing on my head, and, with a painful cry, I began to rip it off, pulling my head away from it. With a wet tear, pieces of my scalp were ripped off, before I was finally free. I rolled over on the hard ground, pushing myself away. Moloch was screeching in pain, his tongue swinging towards me. He didn't have a skin mask on his face anymore, revealing 1,000 green eyes, each one from a different animal. "You can't escape from me," Moloch hissed, already moving towards me as his tongue swam forward. Then there was a flash as something slammed into it. Something embedded. Moloch screamed. Mickey Mouse drew back the axe and swung again, smacking it into his carapace. "What?" he shrieked, drawing back from the masked man. No, what are you?" "This is impossible. I am a former angel of heaven. I sat near the Lord himself. You're just a human. You both are." "Oh?" said a deep rumbling voice, followed by a thumping nearby. I turned to see the form of Beelzebub behind me, his glaive held loosely in one hand. "Beelzebub," Moloch hissed, "what are you doing here? Fuck off, this is my prey." Beelzebub snorted. "Your lies are in vain, brother. You've only ever been able to taunt those weaker than you until they can fight back." Mickey raised his swung axe again, causing Moloch to scamper back. "This human, he is different. There's something about him, something." I didn't want to just lay there and do nothing, so I reached into my pocket, then smirked. "Hey, asshole," I said, pointing the pistol at Moloch. "Eat this." When I pulled the finger, my arm shot back from the recoil. Moloch at first laughed, until one of his other legs exploded. "Are you fucking serious?" he shrieked. "This is not happening, not to me. I'm one of the generals of hell." Beelzebub sighed. "A poor one, you envious spider. I'll see you in the void, you incompetent child." Then he flew off again, without so much as glancing over his shoulder. "I am not incompetent." Moloch shrieked after him when Mickey's axe managed to land in his carapace. I began firing wildly at him, each bullet impacting onto his shell. Mickey's swings came down harder and faster, splitting open the shell and revealing the organs within. By the time he stopped, Moloch was laying on the pavement, his legs broken in several places as he twitched. His tongue, all the faces gone from it, hung uselessly out of his mouth. No, this isn't possible. His eyes flashed towards me, burning with envy. "You should have been like all the others on my tongue, screaming in torment, in their own little hells of my design. You." "Shut up," I said, pointing the gun at him and then firing as Mickey swung his axe into his head. His eyes exploded into a fountain of green gore and pus. His corpse began to fade slowly, becoming first transparent before vanishing altogether. I raised my hand into the empty space it had once been. I was breathing, shocked beyond belief. I raised my hand into my bleeding temple, feeling the pieces where my scalp had been ripped off. Then Mickey spoke.
"Will you help me find my shoe?"
I turned to him. Breadcrumbs was still clustered around the mouth of the mask, and I looked down at his axe, covered in pieces of Moloch and other blood. "Sure," I said slowly, "if you can help me."